Hello and welcome to the Rogers Brief. I'm Adam Rogers. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. Today was day 33 of the Mass Casualty Commission proceedings. And today was focused on the tweets, the Facebook posts that the RCMP made during the 13 hours of the active shooter mass casualty situation unfolding. Many tweets sent out, Facebook posts usually followed immediately after. But crucially and significantly, no emergency alert issued or directed to be issued by the RCMP. That was really one of the questions that came up in the immediate aftermath of the mass casualty, and the RCMP has been sometimes attempting to explain what they did. So today we got a big chunk of that where there were 3 witnesses, and then the day started off with a 25-minute foundational document presentation, just going through some of the timelines and laying out when certain tweets and other posts were made by the RCMP. So the foundational document was called RCMP Public Communications, April 18th and 19th, 2020. But it's really what the whole day was about was attempted to explain why those were made and how that was done, what the background was behind those tweets, the only public communication that the RCMP made during that time. All right, so we had the foundational document presentation. We also had 3 witnesses. We had Corporal Jennifer Clarke, who is retired Corporal Jennifer Clarke now. People may be familiar with Corporal Clarke. She's been the spokesperson for some years for the RCMP in Nova Scotia. May have seen her on television. Second witness was EMO Planning Coordinator Glenn Mason. He's a fairly brief witness. And then the third and probably most significant witness, fascinating witness really, the highest level RCMP officer we've seen so far, RCMP Superintendent Dustine Rodier, who was she was in charge of the RCMP emergency management section, and she was in sort of the communications world, in charge of setting up the new operational communications center in Burnside. So overnight, of course, things we're getting 911 calls after 10 p.m. 11:16, Stuart Baselt, first officer on the scene, is talking about an emergency broadcast going out. Prior to that, at 10:47, Staff Sergeant Carroll had made some comment to Baselt and the other officers about a reverse 911 scheme where somehow they would contact people in the area. That didn't really exist or materialize at that point. At 11:30 on Saturday night, the 18th, Corporal Crotreau, who had same sort of level as Jennifer Clarke, she was her counterpart, issued a tweet saying that there was a firearms complaint in the Portapique area. People to stay in their homes, close the doors. That stood as the only real public remark until 8:02 the next morning, when Leah Scanlon posted a tweet. Then there was some other tweets. The next significant one at 10:04, a tweet about staying away from the Hidden Hilltop campground. 10:17, a tweet with a photo of the replica cruiser. And at 10:21, saying that Gabriel Wortman was in Central Onslow, Debert, and is in an RCMP uniform. 10:39, stay tuned to the RCMP account. 11:04, suspect is in Brookfield in an RCMP car and uniform. 11:06, he's in Brookfield with a silver Chevy SUV, corrected to or specified to say silver tracker at 11:24. 11:35 is another tweet saying that Wortman is not RCMP but wearing the uniform, which actually wasn't true at that point. And at 11:40 saying the shooter now in custody, when actually he was deceased. But anyway, that's so throughout the night, with all of those communications, either the information was either dated or just simply inaccurate, or really understated the degree of danger that was outstanding. Certainly firearms complaint sitting overnight didn't really in any way describe the situation. So Jennifer Clarke came in to duty on that morning, and she testified really her main evidence was to talk about the communications structure. All right, so she was at home, and talking about, she had her work phone and her, a phone with work capabilities, and at home, personal capabilities. And, the two, you couldn't send a picture from one to the other. She had to use her laptop, all kinds of time delays there. But the main issue was this structure of the RCMP when it comes to making a decision to send out a public alert of any kind, or even a tweet. They treated it as though there was really no time urgency. So two things. One is they used the same command structure. So instead of Jennifer Clarke or any of the commanders on scene being able to issue something, it went from many people involved in this. There was Jennifer Clarke, Leah Scanlon, Staff Sergeant McCollum, Staff Sergeant Halliday, Corporal Croteau, Miss Byers, who was also in the office, and then Superintendent Campbell and Staff Sergeant Jeff West also consulted about these. So lots of people consulted, as you might do in a stagnant situation. Miss Clarke, Corporal Clarke, talked about the Desmond Inquiry, which of course we all know about, and the aftermath of that. But of course, there was all kinds of time to deal with it, get all the facts, that sort of thing, before making an alert. And so, of course, you go up and down the chain and make sure everybody's on the same page and on board with what's being said, and it's all accurate, all that stuff. So the chain of command, that stayed in place despite the urgency. The second thing was this desire to have, check every detail. We can't be wrong, is what how Corporal Clarke put it. So the analysis paralysis that we've heard described by some of the emergency alert experts certainly was in play here. Instead of just putting it out there and, dealing with details or adding details as they were uncovered, they waited until they had everything. They felt they had everything right, as they would in a stagnant situation that, they're coming in after the fact and discussing. Okay. At one point, she's talking about as well the risk to officers if an alert is put out and, all of a sudden every officer is a target. Of course, we've heard significant dispute of that theory from the experts, but her answer was, that she had to consider the safety of the police, and it was put to her in cross-examination that, the safety, so you consider the safety of the police more important than the safety of the public. And she didn't really answer the question, but it's pretty clear from her evidence that was the case. So, she was also asked in cross-examination because there was a period of time, a half an hour, where she had the photo and didn't send it out and needed to wait for approval on a tweet before it was sent. And she was asked, well, what about who uses this and the demographic? And of course, Kristen Beaton, who was following social media, fits perfectly into that demographic of who they would expect to be receiving this information and amplifying it within the community. But because of that half hour, it was just too late. So that was sort of a key point in the cross-examination there, that delay had a real tangible effect, an immediately identifiable effect. And the next, that's as much I want to say about Ms. Clarke's evidence. It was significant for those real 2 points, the structure and then getting every detail instead of just sending something out. The second witness kind of demonstrated sort of made that point inadvertently in a way. Glenn Mason was the EMO person. His job with EMO is he sets up sites with, whatever resources they need. If they need, equipment of any kind, he arranges it. But he had offered Alert Ready to the RCMP through Staff Sergeant Ettinger, and they played the tape of it. And when you hear Staff Sergeant, Mr. Mason offers this, suggests it to him, and at first Staff Sergeant Ettinger thinks he's talking about a helicopter for some reason, but quickly realized, oh, you mean, the emergency alerts. And the way he reacted to it was like a bit of surprise, but oh, that's a good idea, kind of a reaction. And then you can hear him yelling across the room, wherever they were, to Superintendent Rodier. But of course, that conversation couldn't happen directly. They had to get off the phone and try to coordinate otherwise. And all right, you call this person, you call that person, and things took time. Of course, there was no emergency alert eventually issued. But the point I was going to come back to is with Staff Sergeant Ettinger. He's like, "Oh, the emergency alert. Oh, so yeah. So we could say his name, where he is, and he's driving the replica vehicle. He just kind of laid out the message right there as he was hearing it. So it just sort of demonstrated in real time how quickly and easily a person could actually draft a message and get that out to the public and have it done very effectively. So I thought, I think Mr. Mason was called up just to really convey the fact that he passed that on to Staff Sergeant Ettinger, but Staff Sergeant Ettinger's response was quite telling in a few ways. All right, so that was those are those two witnesses, but the real highlight of the day was Superintendent Dustine Rodier. And Superintendent Rodier, I know there was lots of speculation because of her role, or perceived role at least, in the emergency alert, the failure to issue that. Where was she? Was she missing that morning, or what? Anyway, we have the timeline of when she went in. She got to the operations center, communications center, about 10:30, 10:40 Sunday morning. So really too late to be very effective, but she was involved. I would describe, so she was very well prepared. She has clearly been watching the proceedings of the Mass Casualty Commission very closely. She was able to reference the testimony from other witnesses. Unlike, I think, every other police officer we've heard, she's been watching these proceedings. Other officers have, found it too difficult or just didn't want to, from whatever, lack of interest in some cases, it seemed. But she is very interested, and I would, I guess, describe her as Corporal Mills would describe her, I think, as a politician police officer. She's very smooth, gave long answers, all has, with a narrative in mind. I mean, she comes from the communication side. She knew what her narratives were going to be, what she wanted them to be, and she took advantage of every opportunity when there was a question asked to, all right, I'm going to say something. I might come around to your question, but I'm certainly going to keep talking for a long time about what I want to say. And that was her sort of approach to all of this. So it was interesting to watch, except one of the things it meant was that cross-examination of Superintendent Rodier didn't take place until after 5 o'clock. Really anything after 4 p.m. is going to be missed by the supper hour news and some of the, Canadian press and other news outlets that have to get stories out at a certain time. They have a deadline each day. So anything that happens beyond that time is not going to get covered, or certainly not as well. It would get covered the next day, perhaps, but just not as thoroughly as the stuff from earlier in the day. So I suspect Superintendent Rodier would have known that and was giving very long answers because, like I said, it stretched into the afternoon. I mean, they had 3 witnesses in a presentation today. Maybe that was pushing it a little too much, especially with Superintendent Rodier, who I know lots of people wanted to hear from. So all of that was kind of interesting, just as the manner of her presentation, I'll put it that way. But substantively, there was something really interesting too, and it's about her awareness of the Alert Ready system. Now, she has said that she, as of April of 2020, had no idea. She didn't know what Alert Ready was. Okay, yet. We've heard from Mr. Mason and others that there were presentations made to the RCMP on Alert Ready in 2015, 2016, 2019, and 2020. All right. Police were all, throughout Nova Scotia, were sort of looking at revitalizing the Amber Alert system. So it seems curious to me that the development of such a potentially important tool would not have at least got on the radar of somebody in a senior role in RCMP communications. But it's certainly it's in her interests to downplay the Alert Ready system. We didn't know anything about it, didn't know how it worked. Let me try to convince you that it doesn't work very well, and it wasn't a tool anybody ever thought of or should have thought of, is sort of the message. When instead, and so there's no proof that she was at any of these presentations. To her, I have to say that too. But I think unless it can be proven that she definitely did know about some of these things, she'll just deny it, and that's where, unfortunately, I'll have to stand. So, but I suspect she knows, well, it would be easy to suspect or, think that she might know more than she's letting on. Okay. But, so, as I said, the cross-examination didn't start till after 5 p.m., but for anybody that was hitting their deadlines and the reports, they missed some good stuff because there was 3 things in the cross-examination I'll get to very quickly, and I see we're at 15 minutes plus, so I'll keep it quick. But this was quite interesting. The first thing she said to Tom McDonald was, if Portapique happened, the exact same incident happened today, would they have issued an alert? The answer was not definitely yes. It was, well, maybe. Have to think about it. Really? Okay, that was kind of curious. But it was both incredible and not surprising. I mean, she wasn't going to say anything that she did was wrong or anything that the force did was wrong. And if it was sort of put to her clearly, she was like, well, I wasn't there, I can't comment on it. Second thing was from Josh Bryson, who I thought did a great job in his cross-examination. Because when talking about the alert ready system, Superintendent Rodier earlier in her direct examination, unchallenged by the Mass Casualty Commission lawyer, said, well, right after Portapique, we issued an emergency alert, and there was a suspected active shooter situation. I think it was just a week later, and we got a whole bunch of calls to 911, and 29% of them were unanswered or didn't go, implying that 29% of calls made during that time were, emergencies that went unanswered. Well, Josh Bryson pointed out that there was, there was these sort of fail-safes in place where extra calls were being diverted. There was all kinds of other explanations he went through with her that it wasn't 29%. It may have been 0%. So there's no evidence of any emergencies missed during that time. And, and he also went through or, talked about the volume of calls on the weekend of the 18th and 19th over that time. And there, thousands of calls and very few that were sort of nuisance calls. So he kind of undermined that part of her account. Third one was Tara Miller talking about recommendations from the Moncton report, the McNeil report of the Moncton RCMP shootings, and how one of them is to implement this pictometry system to make sure that everybody has good mapping, so for containment purposes. And we know that pictometry didn't work well. Our staff sergeants couldn't access it, or that just, it just wasn't working. They couldn't use it. But Ms. Miller pointed out to Superintendent Rodier that the RCMP website says that in 2017 that recommendation was implemented. So that was certainly misleading. One wonders what else of the Moncton Report, which some of the staff sergeants claim not to have even read, have not also been implemented, but everyone thinks they have been because it's on the website. So lots of interesting stuff today. Didn't really, some problems, of course, with the way that the RCMP communicated over the weekend, the choice of social media platform rather than an emergency alert, and everything that went with that, the slowness, the incomplete information that was provided, even for those that did see the posts, couldn't really act effectively on the information because it was either dated or just simply incorrect. So lots of problems with that, lots of recommendations I'm sure will emerge from it. Tomorrow we're going to hear more of this from Leah Scanlon is the witness, I think maybe the only witness, but certainly the first witness, I think, tomorrow morning, who was the boss of Corporal Clarke. So we'll hear about that and some of the more of the structure and the decision making that went into these public communications over that weekend. All right, that's it for day 33. Thanks again for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.